superior than the other. Married people also are called to follow Jesus uniquely. Religious are called, diocesan are called, single people are called, each is a vocation. So today when we're talking about vocation Sunday, we're not just talking about the vocation to religious life and to priesthood, we're talking to all are called to follow Jesus. Search for your own unique call. Now, this is quite different from what we were brought up with, definitely. That in some way religious were the better. But we don't see that and we don't understand that anymore. I'm sure you, as Capuchins with a very strong, long tradition of sound theology in the Franciscan, have always espoused deeply the rich understanding of theology flowing from the scripture. And you, in your tradition, have contributed and still contribute so much to the biblical understanding of theology, which is at the heart of Vatican II. And even though there are in Catholic Church today and some elements of Catholic theology which are trying to take us back to even before Vatican II to Vatican I, I think Franciscan tradition has always been very marvelous in resisting such attempts to take us back, but rather to take us always forward, listening to the Spirit. Another newness in our religious life today is growing pluralism. That is, today our communities are pluralistic. No longer are communities just homogeneous one culture communities. Our Father Provincial was sharing with me yesterday how you are present in different parts of the world from this province, whether it's in our own country in the northeast of India or whether it's in Sri Lanka. There are Pakistanis and a few Sri Lankans and possibly maybe Indian. And then you have some working in the United States of America or Japan. And suddenly the communities are multicultural, multilinguistic, international communities. And this is getting more and more common in religious life. For us, Redemptorists, we are in the process of what we call restructuring everything, because for different reasons. The vast drop in our numbers has called us to restructure. We have now one division for Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, Belgium, one division, and it's in the southern Italy, not far from where the founder had started the first division. And when you saw photographs come out of that, we call it the International Division for Southern Europe. And so there's a Spaniard, there are 2 Italians from the south, 1 from the north, and there is a Frenchman, also Eastern, there are 2 Slovaks. For us, this is getting very normal. This is the new normal. Might not be so evident for you all because you all have still, each province here in India has its own unique division. But communities are getting very, very pluralistic. Another aspect is new numbers in religious life. Maybe you are still the largest single, and you'll have to correct me because I'm not sure, I'm just taking a guess here, the largest single group of Capuchins must be still Italian. But it could be changing. It could be changing and changing quickly. It definitely is not for us Redemptorists, even though we are an Italian congregation, Southern Italian congregation. Both our Italian provinces are less than 100. And dropping. It's the same now all over Europe for us, excepting Poland. But even in Poland, what used to be the biggest province, now Vietnam is our biggest province. And Poland used to be just about 300 I think by the next general chapter, they will drop below 300 in that province. But Vietnam is jumping by leaps and bounds. Indonesia, jumping by just 19 final professions, which means 19 ordinations for 2020, and almost the same for 2021 projected for Indonesia. So suddenly there are new numbers. The traditional provinces in religious life of the major congregations, be it few Capuchins or us Redemptorists or the Jesuits or Salesians, Europe is no longer holding majority. And Asia is bubbling, is increasing. There are phenomenal increases in Africa. South America is holding steady, and this is for many congregations. In fact, South America was holding steady, is now beginning a decline. And that's what's reflected in this Holy Father's very strategic appointment of key members to curia positions. No longer are they European. No longer is he even giving cardinal titles to European sees, which were traditionally cardinal sees. No, he's moving it out because he sees that it's no longer Europe's center. The numbers have changed dramatically. And as you see, many religious congregations, we for sure have not had European superiors general. Our president is a Canadian. The previous was an American. The previous one to him was Spanish. And I don't see Europeans featuring very much anymore, at least in a few of the major congregations, as you can see, even with the Jesuits. This is happening. So new numbers in religious life. And last, new fears. New fears. When I was in my novitiate, this was not in the horizon at all. It was only when I went to Ireland to study for my master's in 1995, this began to hit. It came as a shock for me. And I share it with you later today. The tragedy of male clerical sexual abuse has rocked the church, hit the church, and continues to hurt the church. Despite this Holy Father asking again and again for forgiveness. This Holy Father instituting strict protocols and very strong rules. As you know, we all have to sign protocols. Major superiors are being again and again cautioned and warned. If you today, a case comes up of abuse of a minor, and we're talking now 18 and below, it used to be 14, now it's gone to 18. Any abuse case of 18 and below comes to me, I immediately have to report to the Superior General. The Superior General immediately has to report to the CDF, Congregation for Doctrine and Faith. He cannot handle it. If I don't report, and it goes to the congregation, I lose my job, the Superior General loses his job. That's it. That's it. It's very clear. This Holy Father is very clear. He's even taken off a cardinal, as you know, in Poland, because the man 20 years ago did not act. So he stripped him of his title. I don't really believe that we in India understand the seriousness. We religious do, because all of us are again and again put through grilling and put through more and more courses and seminars in religious congregations in India. But the diocesan clergy definitely have not understood the seriousness. From my own experience in India. Why am I saying this is a new fear? It's a fear because I know in my own congregation, provincials say to me, and I've said to me before when I was in our spiritual said, we don't know when the next case is going to come up. We've had severe cases in our provinces in the United States, in our provinces in Canada, different provinces in France, Australia, New Zealand, we've had to pay out enormous amount of money. A couple of our provinces were bankrupt, complete bankrupt, paying out the civil suits in these cases. And the tragedy is, a couple of provincials shared with me, we don't get this experience in India as much because we don't have civil cases as a criminal case, where even though the confrere, the brother is dead, and the case is registered and accused, and there's no way to resolve that. And the provincial has to continue to work with that family or the victims who have made the accusation, whether it's true or not. As you know, so many cases, at least in religious life, the person accused has to be taken off all office, all clerical ministry, but at least has the shelter of the religious community. It's not the case with the diocesan clergy. We are not. Zero tolerance. So for us in religious life, superiors, yourselves, major superiors, this is a fear. It's a fear. God forbid a case comes up. It is enormously draining of not just emotional energy for sure, and physical energy too. Dealing with one case can exhaust you. Dealing with the victim, the victim's family, media, if the media gets hold of it, it is tragic. No longer can we hide things under the carpet. And so this is a new fear for us in religious life today. When will it hit us? Is a question sometimes might not be voiced, but definitely thought of. So this is some of the newness in religious life today. At the same time, religious life is not living in a vacuum. We are living as religious in our world. Yes?
You are speaking of new fear. Externally, because in India, basically the threat to minority institutions.
I'll come to that yet. Talking about the impact of our society, culture, political issues of fundamentalism. So these fears were from within religious life. And I'm going to come immediately to how society is impacting us, and then those fears as well. Yeah, the whole issue of fundamentalism, the whole government system. That's immediately, right? So yes, exactly to take on from there, we are not living in a vacuum. We are living in the context of our society, our country, our culture, and all of that is impacting us. The politics or the political sphere is equally impacted. Economically, we are following what is called a neoliberal system. And today, theology is reflecting on this, where our world economics is functioning in such a way that the poor are kept poor and the rich are kept rich. India is a classic case of what's happening right now. We are being ruled by a fundamentalist ideology that is pro-rich. That is pro-rich. It is not pro-poor. Let's not make any live in a fool's paradise. All fundamentalist ideologies, all what we call conservative parties, political parties, like the Republican Party in the United States, like our fundamental parties here in India, are pro-rich. They are pro-business housing. They are pro-multinational. They are not pro-poor. The parties like, I'm not sanctifying and making holy the Democratic Party of the United States, or the Congress Party of India, or similarly the Labour Party of the United Kingdom. No, I'm not. What I'm saying is that these parties have traditionally espoused the causes of the poor through socialist agenda. trying to somehow offer the poor something. But you take government after government, whether it's the United States, whether it's India, whether it's the Philippines, whether it's Brazil, Argentina, these are being run by what we call right-wing ideologies that are pro-rich. That actually, very fascinatingly, use religion as their means to win power. It's the same happening all over. Look at Trump. Let's move away from the BJP. Now look at Trump. What did Trump do? He took the Bible and stood before a church. And he uses Christianity. He is as a Christian, has nothing to do with Jesus as anybody. And yet he uses Christianity for his own personal gain. In fact, some even call him the savior of the Catholic Church. I've found messages going around. Vote for Trump, he's saving the Catholic Church. He has no interest in the Catholic Church. His interest is only in himself and his rich, wealthy business enterprises. But this is what they do. This is what we call the new or neoliberal economic system that uses God as a means to get people to vote for them, but in that bargain they are promoting their own economic agenda. India is a classical case study for this. So yes, we are abusing our nature in India. Goa is under major threat right now. This is the victim of this system. And we are going to be losing Goa. But BJP doesn't care one bit. They just want to fill the pockets of these very wealthy men who are going to get richer and richer. As you know, if it's one or two, three of major business houses in the United States, there are one or two or three major business houses in India that the whole country is being sold to. That's the economic system that's at play. That's the economic, all in the name of development. But where is the development? This is not just India. This is the same in the Philippines. It's the same in Brazil. And people are trying to revolt. And in some places, the church is trying, where the church is in majority. Brazil, Argentina, Philippines, United States too, struggling. And this Holy Father is constantly against it. And therefore he's being attacked, even from within the church, by people who are affiliated to these big business houses, tragically. At the same time, the tragedy of our people is increasing. There are all kinds of physical and psychological illnesses increasing. And that's a fear. Today you have more people visiting psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists, suffering from deep emotional trauma. You have increasing suicide, getting very, very common, even tragically in religious life and priesthood. Women religious, young women religious, taking their lives. Priests taking their lives. Male religious taking their lives. It's affecting all of us. There's also acts of terrorism continuing in the name of religion. There's disintegration of persons, drug addiction. We've only touched the tip of the iceberg. The Bollywood industry is filled with drugs. Filled with drugs. I was talking to a cosmetic surgeon who does face reconstruction, who does removing of pigmentation. Your skin is dark, if you want to make it light. Once you start playing with that, you will suffer pain, severe pain. Painkillers don't help after a while. Therefore, they move to drugs. A lot of our Bollywood actors and actresses are on drugs for this purpose, because they've reconstructed their faces. They've changed the color of their skin. They've done pumping their bodies. When you play with the body of pain is enormous. We've lost Sri Devi to overdose of drugs because she tried to be less than 30 at the age of 50 something. Because she redid her whole body. But she has to pay the price. Michael Jackson in the United States. But you can start quoting actor after actor, actress after actress in India. Drugs is massively in Goa. It's the scourge of Goa. Drug parties abound and the victims of drugs. Infectious disease. We are right in the middle of a pandemic. It's not for me to discuss and discern who started, where it started. We are struggling to cope with this. We don't know when a vaccine will come, if at all. Infectious disease. You think with all our development, all our scientific research, we could have prevented this? But technology, where is technology? We are humbled. We are brought to our knees by this infectious disease. Lack of fundamental resources for necessary purposes. Laudato Si raised the whole issue of deforestation, destruction of the environment, water, of land, the land mafias, the forest mafias, the sand mafias, all of this. Again, India is a classical case study, but not just India, all over. The destruction of the environment continues unabated. Fundamentalism, which Father just mentioned, and we are all afraid of this. In all religious traditions, whether it's Islam, there's Islamic fundamentalism, whether it's Hinduism, Hinduistic fundamentalism, whether it's Catholicism, Christianity, Christian fundamentalism, there's Catholic fundamentalism. Where the fundamentalist lives in a closed world and keeps people out and sees themselves as superior, whether it's Islamic fundamentalists or even Catholic fundamentalists. They become vicious, they become everything their religious tradition does not espouse. So in all my dialogue or my work with the Islamic people here in Bengaluru, they are so embarrassed to say that they are Islamic. Islam, messengers of peace. They say, Father, it's just so embarrassing. Sometimes we want to bury our head. This is not Islam. And so you can see what's happening. I have to say the same thing, that there is Christian fundamentalism or Catholic fundamentalism that's equally bad, that keeps people out. It's in this context that we understand Fratelli Tutti, this very powerful encyclical that's challenging in at least 3 chapters, chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7, the politics of fundamentalism. The politics that keeps people out, the walls that we build. And yes, there is then the fears, which Father so rightly pointed out, of how there is political interference in the way we live our life. And you see this in Philippines. I'll just talk of Philippines. It's a Catholic country. But you have a Catholic who does not profess to be Catholic. He professes Catholicism, but he doesn't live Catholicism. And he's doing things that are absolutely against human rights. He's killing his enemies in the name of destroying druggies and drug peddlers, and that's not true. And when the Catholic Church has taken him on, like any dictator, he arrests and he kills. We had to, in the middle of the night, take one of our redemptorists, and redemptorists have always challenged dictatorships in the Philippines. We lost 2 redemptorists in the Marcos regime. Now we nearly lost Father Picadell, and we had to smuggle him out of the country. He's now in our general house in Rome. And we're still watching him because that man can kill him, even from the Philippines, gets him to be assassinated. So there's the fear. When you stand up to the government and you speak the truth, or you work for the poor, which the government doesn't like, then you suffer. Father Stan Sami is a classical case. And as you've seen, how the government will change and bend and manipulate the Supreme Court, the highest body, to free its own person, but to give a straw for a Parkinson patient who's in his late 80s or almost 90, for a straw to drink water, they need 25 days to convene a court hearing to allow the straw. Now, this is it. This is it. And in all due respect to some elements in the Catholic Church that have not stopped talking and still keep talking. There's the Jesuits all over, and many of us participated in different movements, but there is a fear in some areas. We don't know when they will come against us. And this is a natural fear that we have. And so they might not come directly, but they will come through different ways. They check our institutions. They'll send income tax raids. They will send CBI to investigate something from the past. They'll check our property documents. This is the subtle persecution. And so, rightly said, these are the fears we have to encounter in our society today. In the midst of all of this, there is globalization, which has changed the way the world is. Bangalore now, because of the pandemic, is all slowed down. But Bangalore runs so many companies for Scotland, for England, for Italy, for Germany, for United States of America, all run from Manyata Park, from Electronic City, from Whitefield. And these people are working in the odd hours of the day and night, in the morning, to keep their clocks. This is globalization. Goods are not manufactured in a country anymore. They are manufactured in another country, sold in another country, handled by someone else. The world has come together like never before. Like never before. Italy is a good example for those of us who know Italy well. Italy always prides itself on its food, Italian food. But in most of the restaurants in Rome, you can almost be sure that you will not be waited upon by an Italian waiter. It will be a Bangladeshi. They are doing all waiting jobs or washing in the kitchen of the restaurant. Even some of the very good, fine restaurants in Rome, the chefs are no longer Italian. That's globalization for you. The winner of, this was 3 years ago, now I'm a little out of touch, but the winner of, every year there are different competitions in Rome. Their famous pasta in Rome is alla carbonara. That's the Roman pasta, made with cheese and ham and stuff. The winner of, I think it was 2017 competition, was a Bangladeshi. That's globalization. And you go to the store, you're definitely not going to buy an Italian product. You'll have an Italian mark on it, but it's manufactured either in Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, Pakistan, with their product, with their mark, with their name. That's globalization. Globalization has its own fears and challenges. And it's important for us, my dear brothers, because you as a congregation are moving to work in Japan or the United States or Sri Lanka. You're going to be with different culture. And the home culture is threatened by those coming into this culture. And so, as we experience in Goa, any crime in Goa, whom do we blame? We don't blame our Goans or the migrants. We blame them, even though whether they are responsible or not responsible for the crime. We blame them. Oh, they are destroying our beautiful Goa. What we're not seeing is we foolish Goans that left Goa. Maybe the foolish is a strong word. And they're all over the world, but in Goa. And so when others are coming in to do the work which is necessary to keep Goa going, we are to blame. This is the effects of globalization, the negative effects. And that's why this Holy Father is again and again on the theme of migrants. Because there are migrants all over the world. And the tragic reality, and this is part of the under effects of globalization, the ones who are strongest against migrant people were migrants before. So let's take the United States of America. Most of the whites of America are not local. They came 100 years ago, 150 years ago from Europe. They were migrants. And they are the ones who now don't want others to come in. It's the same with South Americans living in the United States. I'm just taking this as a case. They don't want other South Americans to come in, but they came in. Now they've come comfortable, and we Indians are the same in the United States of America or in Canada. And I had to challenge my own sister and brother. They immigrated years ago, they are now Canadian citizens. But sometimes the language they use, the way they talk about, oh, these Chinese are coming in. Oh, wait a minute. What do you mean these Chinese are coming in? You came in too. You are not Canadian. Canada is a land of the First Nations, or what we call what they call First Nations, or the locals. They are the Canadians. The rest, everybody, including you, my brothers, brother-in-law, and sister, are not. But how we change. And we become anti the ones coming in after us, no? That's the tragedy. Let's take a pause here, my dear brothers. There's a lot of freshness, newness, I mentioned, in terms of lifestyle, language, numbers, pluralism, theology, that's refreshing in religious life. But there are also challenges that our world, our society, our culture, our political sphere offers us. Has the church been quiet? No, it hasn't. As a matter of fact, the church gave a resounding call to religious to respond to the signs of our times. Our Holy Father Francis, in February 2017, in speaking to the Superior General, he used the expression fidelity in consecrated life. This was his topic. He said, and I'm going to quote a lot from him, we can say that at this moment, faithfulness in religious life is being put to the test. If you examine statistics, he said, and the superior generals were analyzing statistics, he said, we are seeing a bleeding, a hemorrhage that weakens consecrated life and then the very life of the church today. In other words, so many religious are abandoning religious life. More in the females than in the males. This is a phenomenon in India. 1 year after final vows, 2 years after final vows, or any time in between, so many young women religious are abandoning religious life. For different reasons, but they are. This is a very frightening phenomenon. Male religious too are abandoning religious life. Amongst us, I'm not sure, like I said, I don't know about you, but many male religious redemptorists are abandoning religious life and becoming diocesan. For different reasons. They just don't want to be religious anymore. And some abandon it altogether. The Holy Father says this abandoning of consecrated life worries us. It is true that some leave as an act of honesty, sincerity. They don't want to live double lives. Because they recognize the serious discernment they have made, and that's good. However, others gradually, with the passage of time, become less and less and less faithful. Very often Few years after their perpetual vows, their levels of fidelity start to drop. And the Pope asked, why? What has happened? Many factors, he says, influence this unfaithfulness. He gives the example of a bishop who shared with him that a young boy, a young man, approached the bishop. He had finished his university degree. He had worked a lot in the parish that he came from. And he came to the bishop and he said to the bishop, Bishop, I want to be a priest. The bishop was very happy. But he said, wait a minute, Bishop, I want to be a priest only for 10 years. And the Pope says, this is not uncommon. He calls it the culture of the temporary. The culture of the temporary. I don't want to commit for too long. Permanence. And so this is an aspect of modern day life. If you look at my father worked in a company from the day he joined the company much before he got married, till the day he retired, same company. Same company. Today Hindustan Petroleum, those days it was Esso, oil company, he was an accountant. Not that his company, everything was very rosy. He suffered much. He was transferred here, there, everywhere. He encountered a lot of difficulties. But it never occurred to my father to look for another job, to leave this company and find another company. He just was committed. Today, if a young person is in one company for more than 2 years, people will say, what's wrong with you? They are constantly moving, changing, shifting. And you say, well, they're going for better prospects, and there are what they call headhunters who look for people. How much they're paying you, you come here, we'll pay you more, we'll give you a better deal, so you leave this and you go there. If this is becoming normal, then this comes into everything of life. Why should I be permanent anyway? I can change. I can give loyalty to someone else. This is happening in relationships, men and women, in marriage. Infidelity is I can shift, I can change my loyalty. And therefore, it's not surprising that it's even in the religious life. I can shift, I can change, I have new loyalties. The Holy Father puts forward a couple of factors that influence unfaithfulness. He said, we are living immersed in a so-called culture of the temporary, of fragmentation, which makes us slaves to fashion. What I am wearing is no longer fashionable. What I am driving is no longer fashionable. What my phone is no longer fashionable. I need to change. This culture introduces the need, he says, and I'm quoting him right through, always to have side doors open to other possibilities. So yes, I have my main door, but I can have a side door too. That living this, I can also have that. And he says this is becoming part of religious life. So yes, I'm in the Capuchins, but I can also maybe have a bank account quietly. I know with us redemptors, we're not allowed to have bank accounts because we are religious. I don't know about you, but I'm presuming you have the same. So, but no, I can have this, and I will find means and reasons to justify that. That's the side door. Or I can have a quiet relationship. That's another side door. There are many side doors, says the Holy Father. It's in this context what I spoke about yesterday, no? Relativism comes in. Relativism is, it's okay. I decide. I decide. Okay, the gospel is saying one thing, the rule of the congregation is saying one thing, but I decide. It's okay. It's no big deal. That's relativism. This is quite normal out there, says the Holy Father. It's now becoming a new subtle normal amongst us in religious life. We live in a society in which economic rules substitute moral rules. Economic rules substitute moral rules. These dictate us in the way we live. So the first contribution to unfaithfulness, the Holy Father says, comes from the society in which we live. This is almost normal for people. It's normal for people to do side businesses, to have a quiet fling, a quiet affair, even though they're married, to say one thing to the boss, but do another project for somebody else. It's quite normal. This is the society in which we live. That normal, which is not moral, has creeped into religious life, which is not moral, but which we are okay with. Some years ago, I was asked to preach by a bishop to the diocesan priest of his diocese in Armagh. And he gave me a couple of instructions. He said, Father, a couple of things. You're a religious, you don't understand diocesan clergy, fair enough. And please don't talk about chastity. Right? Why? No, you all don't understand. We all are celibate, we all live in community. But for us, it's not possible. Right? I was now getting worried. What's the next? Father, please don't talk about accounts. You all are religious, you all live poverty, we do. I didn't want to know. So I said to him, a bishop, in all due respect, please look for another preacher. Because you mentioned two aspects of the gospel, which you're asking me to be silent about. I can't be silent from the gospel. In all due respect to you, bishop, find another preacher. He said, okay, Father. The cycles. That was the diocese, but I believe the same is for us religious. The second factor the Holy Father spoke about was young people. Young people are extremely, to use his language, are living in a world that's very complex, at the same time rich and challenging. And so their lives are rich and challenging. He says there is no shortage of young people with enthusiasm, with excitement, with generosity, who want to commit, who want to be truly spiritual, who are hungering for something different. There are marvelous young people. Not only a few, but there are many, he says. But there are also many young people, he says, who are victims. Victims to the logic of worldliness, which may be summarized as follows. This is his summary. What is the logic of worldliness? The search for success at any price. I want to be successful. If I'm not successful, I will destroy. I will spoil people's names in order to be successful. Easy money and easy pleasure. Easy money, easy pleasure. This logic seduces many young people. I'll give you just two very quick examples. And many of you are formators. I'm sure you're seeing this because I'm seeing this all the time as a major speaker. I've had to ask two men to discontinue in this whole year. One in his first year theology and one just before final hours. The one in his first year theology, 3 years ago, I visited every home of every student in my formation system. Every home. So I know them very well, their family backgrounds. I believe it's important for me. So we discovered that he has bought a phone 3 years ago that cost 12,000 rupees. At that time, my phone was 5,000 rupees. And I was still rich at the time, it was the land. No permission taken. No permission taken. And his family, 12,000 would have been so much of money to manage their life for 2 months. I visited them. I know. And so I say to him, why? Apart from breaking your vow of obedience, you didn't take permission to this. Your vow of poverty, that you, where did you get the money from? His answer, my mother gave me. I said, what? Your mother gave you? Shall I ask your mother? Oh, no, don't ask her. Now, you're moving into lies. What was the point? The point was, I want to possess. I want to have. I want to come across as, you see, intoxicated, the Holy Father says, or seduced by someone. Okay, we forgave and all of that, and cried and begged. I said, okay, fine, let's just put this behind us. And then 2 years later, the rule in our theology here in Bengaluru is no homes. Excepting on 2 weekends of the month, they are allowed to keep their phone for the weekend. We discover suddenly he has had his phone, he's had 2 phones. One, a dummy phone, which he's given to the director, and one, another expensive phone, which he's kept hidden. Now, what do you do? Insincerity, dishonesty, name it all of that. And it's not just the phone, there were other aspects that came out and stuff, no? But this is a young man. A young man. On the one hand, talented, brilliant talent, musician, artist, charming. And you think, oh, there is generosity. But then you suddenly get this, insincerity. The other background, almost same background. From time to time, suddenly, alcohol consumption. You want to wear, most of us redemptorists wear pretty, like yourselves, simple clothing. Perhaps you more than us, because Franciscan spirituality and simplicity is very strong. But suddenly you see a man, I know where he's coming from, I know his home, I know his background, I don't worry about clothing. But it's not just any clothing, it's 2 or 3 marks better than everybody else. Whether it's shirts or trousers or whatever. Okay. All right, no big deal. Young man. Whether it's to do with when he was running our kitchen, he would buy not just coffee, but he would buy most expensive brand of coffee. Cocoa and Ovaltine. The fathers themselves are not having this. But the best of the best. Now, gradually, comments are made. And I said, okay, no problem. But there's a pattern of expenditure, lavish expenditure. Back home, in your home, there is no Ovaltine. There's no green tea. There's no aspects which I know very well. But suddenly in religious life, you demand and you want. But what is our core element in the way we live religious life? And gradually you see the manifestation, be it in alcohol, consumption of alcohol. It's not just consumption of alcohol. Where did you get the money to buy that alcohol? Alcohol is very expensive in Bangalore. But you've been finding money to buy this alcohol? You can't be getting it at home, from home, because we know what family can't afford. So you have other sources of income, not disclosed. So there is a cascading effect. Now these are young men, talented, charming, they may be excellent, but you have this going on. You have this going on. This is what the Holy Father is talking about. Being seduced by what's happening in society. A third factor that conditions us in our living of our fidelity. And the Holy Father says there is a lot of holiness in religious life, but unfortunately, there is also so often a lot of counter-witness that makes faithfulness difficult. So there are some situations amongst religious where we men religious give into routine. We are in the chapel because it's there. We are saying Mass out of routine. There's weariness. There's the burden of managing structure. There's internal divisions. There's the search for power. You know, there's a congregation, MSCB or something, in Kerala, that's CBS. They put on the Vatican has come down and clamped because of massive abuse of power. Investigators from the Vatican have been appointed to investigate this congregation. Abuse of power, massive abuse of power. It's there, abuse of power which destroys faithfulness. Authoritarianism. On the one hand, you get somebody, an authority, who bulldozes his way without any consultation, collegiality. And on the other hand, you have the opposite, laissez-faire. The authority just says, hey, you say, do what you want, I'm not interested. And that too is against fidelity. All of this is anti-witness, which brings me, and with this I stop, to the question yesterday. Where does Jesus figure in all of this? At the end of the day, we are called to follow the Lord. That's what we dedicated our lives for. That's what we stood up so many years ago on the day of your first profession and then on the day of your final profession. 1983, my first profession. 1988, my final profession. I stood up and said, I give my life to the Lord. And I said this publicly. I said this freely. Nobody forced me. I signed the document. I'm saying this freely. I'm saying to people, I want to follow the Lord and follow Him wholeheartedly. And so perhaps in the midst of all of this, we stop today and ask ourselves, where am I in all of this? What is the level of my own fidelity and faithfulness at this moment in my journey as a religious? I had the readings for every day, the first reading in the Gospel. So our first reading today is from James, chapter 2, verses 14 to 26. The Gospel from Matthew 14, 25 to 30. I'll leave it to you.